Hello, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Just playing webinar roulette with Richard Hatherall in the WhatsApp group, and also my email, which I muted once, is now deciding to ping away in the background. Naughty, naughty people. He's one of my colleagues is saying he's going to iron his hands. It's a Dobby joke. If you haven't watched Harry Potter, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's probably best. Hello to you all. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. It's World Cup fever here in Dallas. I actually live on north end of Dallas, right down from the Dallas Cowboys training stadium, and we have also the National Football Museum here as well, soccer museum, I suppose the Americans would call it. And Sweden that's their training base down the end of my road. And so traffic is crazy. You can't drive anywhere in Dallas. It's just absolute mayhem, which is a lot of fun. But England are playing tomorrow in Arlington, which is 40 minutes away from me. And there's a lot of unrest, shall we say, about the fact that the tickets are unaffordable, like literally thousands and thousands of dollars. And I can't go because even though I got some benefits of being a local resident and things like that, I still couldn't buy the ticket because they were all sold out. So it is what it is. But anyway, if you're into World Cup, good luck to you. You'll probably be watching the first game, I think, in 2 hours from now, if you're watching this live. Right, today is a kind of quite a technical webinar. How old are you? It is really that kind of weird question because this year a bunch of regulations came into force to do with knowing how old the people are, or what age group should we say, not exactly how old, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but what age group the people are that are using your apps, going to your website, using your desktop apps. Mobile and desktop are affected, and generally just making sure that the content is not being shown to minors when it shouldn't be. Hi Colin. I would say some people are kind of annoyed about it and say, "Oh, it's Big Brother" and all the rest of it. But actually, we've always restricted certain types of content. Even when I was a kid, there was always the top shelf of the news agent. I'm sure you know what I mean by the top shelf content, which was restricted. And actually, there are lots of things that were restrict to certain age groups. You can't smoke unless you're a certain age already, for obvious reasons, and same with alcohol. So you can argue about freedom of choice and all the rest of it, but actually, can you really can you really argue against the fact that we don't show adult content to minors? I think it seems quite reasonable. Now, where it gets a bit weird is that what the definition of adult content is, or even content suitable for minors, is a bit odd. And we're going to go through the slides and talk about that as well, in terms of how you are able to decide whether your content is suitable for a certain age group or not, because it's really about making sure that all of the content is protected and that it's kind of opt-in for children, and that's children defined in these rules, and also underage people. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hello to everybody that's watching. So I've got a lot of slides and a little bit of code and some places where you can download some ready-made APIs. Now, the biggest problem is iOS, which we'll talk about during this presentation. Android is okay. There is a solution for that. Desktop, weirdly enough, Windows doesn't actually have a solution for that at the moment. I don't know what Microsoft are going to do, but there isn't apparently an API to deal with that. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But how can you comply? If there's no API to actually help you sort of administer the rules. A lot of this is the operating system does the gatekeeping. So on iOS, for example, it's the phone account. And the idea is that the parents, and if you don't have children, then you might not know this, but if you've got children, you can actually say, okay, this is a child's or a minor's phone, and therefore I don't want them to be shown stuff that's inappropriate for their age group. Now, what you decide is appropriate is up to you. It could be, obviously sexual content or something like that, or it could be violent content. It could just be stuff that you don't want them to see. You might not want them to see them any news, for example. The world can be a horrible place, and sometimes you don't want to expose young kids to that kind of thought processes and questions. So everybody's definition of what is appropriate for a child differs, but iOS takes the kind of it's up to the parent's point of view. Google Play services is a little bit different. It's more about categorizing what the content fits into, and then warning the person who's writing the app, this is a child, you should make sure that the content you're showing is appropriate for children. So slight difference, and like I say, Windows doesn't deal with it. Linux is actually subject to this as well. So it doesn't matter what you're using. If you say, "Oh well, I use Linux, I'm fine," actually you can't get away with it. Linux is also under the hammer. All right, so let me pull up my presentation, which is relatively complex, shall we say, and use presenter view. Let me just make sure I do this. It should go on there. And you know how much I hate PowerPoint and its stupid way of doing things, but actually it still is the best presentation thing. All right, so let me share my screen, which is this one. And we don't need my system audio. And I'm going to put me down here so that I'm still here. If I get in the way, I'll move myself. So age verification APIs, I've got a load of links and things like that for you to go to, and the source code as well for some of it. I'll also give you links to that as well. We are going to go back and edit this particular webinar and put some chapters in for on the YouTube replay. Okay, and the reason for that is that it's going to be quite information dense, shall we say, and there are bits that you want to skip. I know some people don't like how I open the webinars. They say somebody said I spent 30 minutes talking nonsense, which I get. I understand some people don't want that. I've said before, I don't want these webinars to be a lecture. I want it to be more like a kind of radio show style thing or something like that. But also I want to impart information that's useful to people. So if we actually put chapters in and take you to the various content, then you should be able to get to it a bit more quickly. And if you're only interested in, say, Android and what the rules are about that, then you can jump straight to it. But that's what we're going to do. Anyway, let's go for it and see if I can pull up the navigation controls and actually make it work. Let me just resize a few things. Hold on. Salut Sylviane in France. 47-year-olds because you verify. Oh yeah, I should have. Yeah, that's funny actually. I should have taken a survey, shouldn't I, and said, "Can you all confirm what age you are?" Very funny. Anyway, let's go on to the slides. So, what are we talking about? Well, it's a challenge in the United States, and I live in Texas, and Texas, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, was one of the first US states to introduce a law that would require you to, I'm going to move my microphone so it's in a better place, would require you to verify that children are not being exposed to certain types of content. And it's not really even that. It's more a case of just making sure that you know what age range your users are. There are now 19 US states with child online safety laws as of 2026. So it's not just Texas. Texas was first, but lots of others like Iowa and a few others followed along. I think Utah and quite a few anyway. There are 1.5 billion people under the age of 18 who use the internet worldwide. That's a lot of people. And if you think about that, the potential to actually you know, expose children to content that you would probably rather they didn't until they were an age where they could deal with it and have it, intellectually mature enough to go, oh, this particular content is either what's the word I'm looking for? Inappropriate. It's not real, or that's not how you treat women, or that's not how you treat men, or it's violent, or something like that. It's a 1.5 billion children users. That's a big kind of potential, problem. 6% of the maximum is the maximum EU DSA fine. So 6% of a company's global annual revenue. So you might say, well, people like Google, oh, they can pay these fines. I can tell you now, I don't care how big you are, 6% of your revenue, even if you're Google, is painful. And I'm sure, the bigger the company, the more likely it is that they're going to want to avoid this, because the likes of the EU are not playing games, and they do win. And 6% can make a significant dent on most companies' revenue. And in some cases, if a company's struggling, it could even take them, you know, out of business. And don't think that it's just Europe and the United States. Brazil has a digital ECA enforcement program that began in March. So if all of our Delphi developers in Brazil, of which we have many, many, many of them, and it's a big deal. Brazil are there as well. And actually, Beantrees brings up a very good point, which is the UK has just banned social media for those under 16, and that is actually, I believe that happened today, didn't it? That looks, is that Joanna? I could be wrong, but I think I recognise you from your profile picture there. I used to be in the UK user group many, many years ago, but who knows? Anyway, but yes, the UK just banned social media for those under the age of 16. That's today. That happened today. Now, although I've got a British accent, I am technically an American, but I have a dual citizenship. Although I can't go back to the UK because my passport now. 18 hours ago, this has been true. So there you go. So that's, it's a moving target. It's already, this is a problem for companies that make their money in that way. So let's carry on with the content and talk a little bit more about it. So oh, Terry from Missouri. Sorry, I just assumed you're in the UK. She says she's Terry. Sorry about that. You look like someone I know in the UK. There you go. Maybe you got a secret doppelganger. Quick, go and commit a crime and blame them. That's how it works. So what are the age verification APIs? Because, do you have to do this all yourself? It's not enough to just ask the user, are you a child, and get away with it. No, actually, the platforms offer some age verification APIs. And this is a bit of a problem for Delphi developers. The reason is that at the moment, it is not incorporated into the runtime library, the RTL. And therefore, you've got to do a little bit of legwork yourself. And in fact, as I will explain later, there isn't really a good solution for iOS at the moment. There is one for Android, and I'll show you the code for that. But I've tried to create one for iOS, and I think I've got it working. But I'm going to put that source code up on a GitHub repo, the iOS version. The Android version is from someone else. So what the age verification APIs, well, like I say, really, you're not on your own, particularly if you're writing mobile apps. You actually should use the platform's APIs. The reason is they do scan for that kind of stuff, and they will expect you to be using it. And if you don't use it, I would say, I don't know this for certain, but I would say that you're going to get rejected in the App Store if you're not using it. So the way it works is the platform will tell you what age range a person's in. And Charles says, never ask a Wookiee their age. Yeah, exactly. So you don't ask the person how old they are. You shouldn't be collecting their dates, their birth dates, or anything like that. And you shouldn't be asking for government IDs, because this is one of the things that iOS and Android do, is they will verify the user based on information they have already. If from that information they have at their fingertips about this person is not enough, they will actually ask them to validate their age using the government ID. Now, in the United States, that's usually a driving license or an ID card or a student ID card. And if the person is too young to have any of those, and in the United States, you could be 15 and get an ID card, then they ask the parent to verify themselves, and then ask the parent to verify the age of the minor. This allows the OS to actually do all the legwork for you. So you are not finding out how old that person is and what their birthday is, which if you're like me, a big fan of Silicon Valley, then there's a really good episode where Huli Chat buys up the Piper Chat app, and they accidentally discover that they've broken the laws, the COPPA laws, as they're called, COPPA, to do with ages, and half the users are a certain age. Now, they actually show them getting the children to verify that age. That would not work in reality. You cannot do that. You've got to use as APIs. It's backed by, as I said, the back account level verification. All these slides will be available, as will the source code. And also parental supervision. iOS in particular likes to do it via a child account linked to a parental account. They can validate the parental account, of course. And failing that, then user self-declaration. Well, from what I saw, that's the very last resort, user self-declaration. It's available on iOS, and I've just realized that my camera is probably obscuring some of the content, so I'm going to turn my camera off, because you don't need that, do you? There you go. You can still hear me now, right? Yes, excuse me. So where were we? Yes. So in my experience, user self-declaration is something that's a really kind of minor thing. Using on iOS, there's a declared age range. On Android, there's what's known as the play signals. Joey says, is this the UK and Australia only? No, it is not. It is the UK, Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, and I think Brazil, which I mentioned earlier on, and a few others. So actually, it's all over the place. Now, the APIs are rolling out in different ways. That is something that you have to check with. Just to answer that question with the slide, the regulatory landscape, well, there's COPPA, which has existed for quite a long time, and the fines for COPPA are massive. They're like $10,000 per incidence, if I recall correctly, and per incidence could be every time a underage person uses the app, that is an incident. So every time that person gets a message or logs into the app, that is an incident, and you get a fine for that from COPPA. It's very, very painful, and you can very quickly add up to hundreds of thousands and millions in fines, and that's not a joke. I'm not saying that to scaremonger you, because I don't care. It's a big problem. Hello from Lima, Peru. Hi. EU DSA, UK, Brazil, Australia, US state law. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. You know, it's a bit of a problem. The declared age range, I'm going to talk about how it works and, you know, what you do with it, what kind of privacy there is. It's not what you think. It is not going to come back and tell you, hey, this person's 12 years old, or this person's 17, or this person's 25. It doesn't work like that. It is a kind of step down type of privacy, and the verification status, the way that works, is actually quite interesting as well. So let's talk about the regulatory landscape. Well, the COPPA Protection Act, or COPPA, should I say, Act has been around since 1998. So it's not a new thing. It became into a force in 2000 and has existed for long enough that actually plenty of people have been prosecuted under copper. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I think there's also now backed up with some prison sentences and things like that for willful um, breaching of copper. So if you willfully ignore your liabilities or something like that, then you can be held personally responsible. So if you have an LLC or you have uh, some kind of partnership that you think protects you, if you are shown to be negligent or willfully ignore it, like you deliberately say, will never hit me, I'm not going to do it, then you can, as an officer of the company, which is the word that they use, then you can be held personally liable. And it's as it's actually has gone up. I thought it was 10,000. It's 51,000 per violation. Per violation. It's a big a big problem. It's enforced by the FTC, and the FTC do not play games either. They've become, in the last 12 to 18 months, a little bit more proactive in prosecuting people as well, and chasing people up. They don't just go for the big boys; they will go for small people as well. So, there's no hiding place. It applies to everything: websites, online services, anything where it is that you are potentially showing content to someone underage. In Texas, there are rules that mean that a website could be prosecuted for showing any form of content that is mature content. The definition of mature is quite weird. When you see me with my games machine behind me, you've all seen my Mortal Kombat 2 machine in the background, my video game machine. You won't see it playing Mortal Kombat during my webinar streams, and the reason is that Mortal Kombat is considered mature content, and we can't show that in the first 30 seconds of our webinar, even though the webinar um, is ticked and saying not for children. We actually tick that box and say it's not for kids. One of the reasons why I have the countdown at the start, the 1 minute countdown, is so that if anybody posts a comment that is offensive, then it's not within the first 30 seconds, and it means we don't get a strike against us. I know it sounds weird, but that is how it works. There's more to what I do than you would think is going on. I mean, the timer is there to allow people to join and join the webinar on time, but it also means that we don't violate things like copper or YouTube rules, which are because of copper, and other things like that. It is a complicated business, and you are probably, if you are writing apps or you've got a website, you're probably subject to it. It doesn't matter where you live. The location is irrelevant to a certain degree. Now, how they enforce it, if you live in Peru, for example, I don't know. But I'm sure if you've got a presence, they'll come looking for you if it's worth their while. Is it going to be worth it for a one-page website that talks about, you know, football socks or something like that? Probably not. But is it going to be worth it for someone where they know where they are in a particular country and can come along and enforce it? Could be. I mean, child protection is important for anybody, and actually for even adults. You don't necessarily want to see certain types of content. I certainly don't. It's been in force for a long time, so you got to post a clear, comprehensive privacy policy. You've all seen it, whenever you've gone there. The updates came in 2024 from the FTC amendments. So they finalized some extra rules to do with the amount of data that you collect. So asking for people to register, you've all seen it where someone has a registration form that seems to be overly inquisitive. And by the way, Jay, it is not only in Texas. Someone here is saying only in Texas. This is not correct. The copper law is United States wide, and the other laws that I showed at the beginning of this are European and Brazilian and Canadian and Australian. So no, don't think it's just Texas. Texas does have some additional regulations, but as I said at the start of this webinar, 19 other states have followed. So don't think that you are going to Say, oh, it's only a Texas thing because you feel like Texas is particularly straight laced, which I accept it is, not necessarily in the area I live in, but certainly some parts of West and East Texas, it's much more conventional and conservative, shall we say. Um, Sylvian says the issue about willing to protect children is that it makes these rules apply to any service. Yes, well, unfortunately, you know, sometimes you have to err on the side of caution. Now, the rules for copper, it cover everything you could imagine. So first of all, not asking for information that isn't relevant, directly relevant to the operation of the system. Uh, one of the things I did when I took over from developer relations was actually stop asking for so much information when we registered for a webinar or something like that. You'll notice it's a lot less now. It's only enough for us to send you information about this webinar. Make sure that you've definitely registered and it's not someone spamming using your email address or something like that. And also, yes, so we can decide and you can tell us whether you're interested in the content that we're going to send you via an email or something like that, plus a one-line opt-out. Now, that's nothing to do with these regulations, but it is partly in keeping with that idea. Copper includes voice recordings, so you cannot have, for example, a jokey speech to text that says something offensive. You have to decide whether what it's saying is offensive. And you'll notice during the webinars, I'm very careful what I say. It also covers photos, so I can't show certain types of photos if within the first 30 seconds of this YouTube video presentation, and videos as well, which you kind of expect. But yes, you can't say offensive things or adult content. So I couldn't swear or cuss, as an American would say, and expect to get away with avoiding the copper rule requirements. Now I don't, because this is not that kind of presentation. But you know how it works. It's common sense, if anything. Enforcement increase. The FTC can pursue per violation penalties, as you know, across the whole user base. So if you've got 1,000 users, and each one of those logged in and it was a violation in some way, and you accidentally showed them a photo, and the photo doesn't even have to be an adult photo. It could be something that's considered adult content. So, for example, it could be a historical photo of a war enactment or something like that. It could be, a medical photo showing some medical procedure, which would be considered adult content. It doesn't necessarily need to be in association with sexual content. And I know that's how most people would consider adult content. Adult content is far more broad range than you think. You have to sit back and think, what would I not want a 9-year-old to see? For example, like someone euthanizing animals, for example, would be considered inappropriate content, even though you would say, well, we all eat. If you're not a vegetarian, you eat meat or something like that. Yeah, but even so, seeing that kind of content is not okay. People being injured, anything that's likely to scare a normal person. So horror content, for example, or jump scares. I know you would say, well, that's just a joke, but actually, this kind of content, if it's got the ability to scare people, then you've got to consider it. Now, as someone says, just don't give mobile devices to children. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But the thing is, you can't control the world, and people do. And the argument is, as we said at the beginning of this webinar, 1.5 billion children are using the internet. So it doesn't need to be a phone. And also, what if they borrow a friend's phone? Are you telling me that when you were a child, you didn't do anything that you were not supposed to do? Come on. I know I did, and I'm sure everybody else did, before the age of you should have done. We all did, and if there's a rule that a kid is not supposed to break, I guarantee the kid will want to break it. That's how kids' minds work. It did when I was a kid. So it is what it is. But yes, I mean, obviously, if you personally want to make sure that your kids are at least the risk of them being exposed to content that is inappropriate, um, yeah, then don't give them an internet phone. But also, it's like saying, don't watch TV, or something like that. It's not how it works. Anyway, that's copper. So copper is kind of pretty unpleasant. And they expanded to teenagers as well. So yes, you could say that anybody under the age of 17 is considered to be a protected age group. And this is where it starts getting interesting. So they started splitting the age groups into smaller groups. So therefore, anybody under the age of 13 was considered one type of child group. Anybody between 13 and 17 was considered another, well, actually 13, 16 was considered another type of group. And then 17 and over, there was another, and then 21 and over was another group. So it kind of started getting to the point where, as you know, games, for example, which have always been scrutinized by, the FTC and people like that, because it was considered video content back in the day. It was treated the same as renting a DVD or something like that. Back in, the days of Netflix and blockbusters and all the rest of it. Video games were considered the same as a movie or something like that, and so it's always had a kind of age certificate. And in some ways, some video games are a bit like movie content. Certainly nowadays, the rendering has got to that point, but that's why it's treated like that. But now, it doesn't matter what your content is; you can be covered. When do these come into force? Well, there's a whole tidal wave of US state laws. I'm not going to apologize on behalf of my adopted country, but at the same time, the EU and other countries have also got similar rules. And as we said earlier on, that there are rules in Brazil, there are rules in the UK, where the UK has just banned all content, I think, under the age of 16 and under. But all these states now, it's not just Texas. I'm not defending Texas, but it's not just Texas. Utah, Louisiana, Florida, California, Texas, and Georgia. So, California is considered a very kind of liberal state, for certain things like recreational cannabis and stuff like that. But that just shows that actually, the concern about minors extends to all sorts of political poles, left and right. It's about not having children exposed to the content, and you, as a software developer, you got to stick in with this and apply to it. Going through the various states, these are the things that Utah care about. App Store accountability, and this is their law. It applies to the app stores, so they're really kind of enforcing it at the app store end, which makes it easier for you. They are actually considering anyone under 18 to be a minor, whereas copper is 17 and under. You must verify the age if you're an app store. So if you're running any form of app store, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but that includes these custom app stores that are available in Europe. If your content is available in the United States and it can go to Utah, and let's face it, the world is joined up nowadays, then you've got to care about this Accountability Act. It's not about your geographic location. It is about how the the content is served up. And if people in Utah can see it and your user is in Utah, then you've got to, abide by the age signals that come down from the App Store. If you providing your own form of App Store where people can buy content, like you've got a game and they can buy mini games or something like that, you may find that you're considered to be an App Store if you take money, or even if it just uses a token system, something like that. So be very careful, because you don't want to end up being categorized as an app store. They do, I think, in the law, make specifications about what is an app store, but it's just worth considering that if you allow people to buy swag in your app, or some kind of upgraded content which they pay you rather than they pay Apple or iOS. And 9 times out of 10 that probably doesn't happen because both Apple and Google have got rules against that. But let's say it's a desktop app. If you are running what amounts to an app store, then you may be subject to the additional rules of an app store, and then you take on a lot of responsibility for anybody that's actually using your app. So be very careful about that. Louisiana minor online safety, minor, not minor, as in smaller. Exactly the same thing, same kind of rules. Again, these slides will be available. I'm not going to read them all out. We'll be here forever. But again, it usually is putting most of the onus on the App Store. So it's Google's problem and it's Apple's problem. That's the way we like it. However, they then pass that down to you and make sure that you're running the APIs. Florida, California, Texas, and beyond. So Florida, again, it came into force last year, and you're probably already subject to it if you are producing it. Someone's saying, so when I have a mathematical application and I don't collect user data and I don't use cookies and I have no problem at all, but what if Microsoft Store places cookies on installing my application? Actually, desktop applications are a bit of a different problem. I'm not going to give you legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. And if you think that you need legal advice, then go and talk to a lawyer. And I mean that, go and ask someone who's actually a lawyer. However, right now, the Microsoft Store is a bit of a mess, in my opinion. And I'm not really, I'm sure that wouldn't be Embarcadero's official position, but I think it's safe to say that the Microsoft App Store is a bit of a problem. When you submit to the App Store, it does ask the Microsoft App Store, it does ask you some information about the content and the rest of it. I think, as far as I know, if you pass through that validation, then you're probably okay. But I can't say that because I don't know what the content is and whether it would, someone like Florida would consider it adult content. As far as I'm aware, for desktop, it's a lot easier. Now, if you do have a mobile app, then it's not so straightforward. You've got to use the APIs. And there is a kind of cooling off period and the rest of it, but even so. But like I say, if you're not sure, get some legal advice because I'm not a lawyer by any means, and all I can do is pass this information on, and then we can work on what we'll do. And we'll probably do a follow up to this because I think it's one of these tricky situations. What about the app available outside the app stores? Well, that's again, you then start to get into the problem of you need to call those APIs. This is one of the questions I've been asked. I'm actually going to show that on the screen. What about an app available outside the app stores? So it depends, I think, Jay, what you mean by that. If the app is an iOS or an Android app and you are not being delivered via the Apple App Store, then you're probably following enterprise rules. And if you're using the enterprise rules in order to deliver that app, then the idea is that all of the people are enterprise users, and I'm not sure how the law would apply in that set of circumstances. Again, I can't give you legal advice, but I'm guessing that it's a different situation. However, if you are trying to get round Apple's distribution via an app store, so you're doing direct downloads onto an Apple device, so you're giving out, your app, and people are giving you direct machine device IDs, or you're using something like one of the ways of distributing it. I forget what the name of it's called now. I should know this. Anyway, there's ways of providing the iOS apps outside of the App Store, but it kind of is used for beta testing and stuff like that. You're going to have to call the APIs. So there is a Signals API that we're going to talk about. That's on iOS. On Android, it doesn't matter whether you go through the store or not. You've got to call the Signals API. because the law is the law. Your app is running. They don't care it was distributed. What they care about is that you're applying to the rules. Now, again, as I said before, maybe if you've just got one or two users, then you might get away with it for a while and be okay. But that I would definitely say that's a bad idea. Because it's like saying, well, if I only shoplift once a year, I'm going to get away with it. You still know you're not complying with the law by taking stuff and not paying for it. And it's the same with, if there's a law that says you're supposed to call this age signals API and you don't do it, um, I suspect you're probably going to be fairly quickly, having some sleepless nights if someone decides to report you, for example. I don't know, what the validation will be, but I'm going to say it's going to happen. So it is what it is. But anyway, as you can see, lots and lots of states, Vermont and Texas. And Texas is the most famous. People want to kind of zoom in on Texas because it was challenged in court. But actually, there were only one of about 11 states. So I know it's fun to, pick on Texas because it's a huge state. But there are lots of others. Nebraska, for example, I used to live in Omaha in Nebraska. It's applies in Nebraska. They have the different set of rules. So a lot going on. EU. So yeah, you're sitting in Europe and you're in Germany. Well, we all know Germany has many, many rules. It's one of the great things about Germans is that they're very proud of the amount of rules they have. I mean, if you do business with a German, they'll put their bank details on invoices, for example, which every other country would go, "Oh my God, no, I wouldn't give them my bank details." Hello, Nigel. And but that's just how Germany works, and it's fine by them. But the EU regulations are pretty fierce as well, and they're not playing games. There is the DSA, the Digital Services Act. Um, they do have a kind of um, a bit of common sense applied to it, I suppose, is the best way of looking at it. In they have the VLOPs. Now, what that applies to are things like Facebook and those kind of users. I think what's the other one I'm thinking of? The streaming platform. Oh, I should know what it. Twitch, and people like that would be subject to those because they have more than 45 million EU monthly active users. But think again, you know. I don't understand why this person's asking about Telegram Delphi groups. We don't run Telegram Delphi groups. And also, I don't think they're harassing people that are criticizing Delphi, but we'll talk about that another time. So going back to what I'm saying, yeah, it sounds like, 45 million. You think, well, okay, that's a lot, but it's not a lot. But actually, that's the EU. There are a lot of countries in the European Union. France and Germany and all, the ones that people know, Netherlands. But once you add up the populations of all those countries, it's very quickly that you're looking at 45 million users is potentially a problem. So I don't know, just be careful, I think is the word. Because these laws are endemic. And as we said at the beginning of this, I don't think you can really argue against someone saying, well, I don't think you should show certain types of content to children. We have rules in place for all sorts of things like preventing, children from entering marriages, for example, at a certain age and stuff like that. Now, other cultures allow different age ranges for marriages and things like that. But overall, we tend to believe that children shouldn't do that. And various other things like you don't want a child of 7 years old to drive a car, for example. You think it's probably not a good idea for an 8-year-old to be drinking whiskey. Whilst we value individual freedoms, we still have to regulate like these EU laws and things like that. So, again, The European rules are a little bit more brutal because they're looking at 6% of global annual revenue. That's because they've lost a few times against people like Google and Amazon, and I think they've learnt their lesson that fining someone like Amazon $1 million is really just, a blink in their profit system. Whereas when you start getting up to 6% of global revenue, it starts to get very, very painful. So, what are you supposed to do? Well, for example, the advertising is controlled mostly by the platform. So people tend to go with the Google Ad platform or the Apple Ad platform if they're going to have advertising in their apps. Now, if you're a web product, then it's slightly different because there tends to be more choices. And we've all been to websites that have had really shady adverts for something that is trying to get you to download what looks like malicious content. But for apps, as long as they're using something like Google or Apple, they do tend to vet the apps. They're actually a lot more. They have a kind of efficiency in the number of people that are earning revenue via that, and they make sure that they're not going to present malicious apps. It's not foolproof, but they're getting pretty good at it. And as J-Bro says, Google knows the age of the person using the app through the signals, and then they do the ad distribution through AdMob. Yes, so AdMob is saving you from worrying about the advertising. Okay, and in fact, if you're showing ads inside your app, and it's via Google or it's via Apple, you're probably going to be okay and not have to worry about it. Because the content is not going to be shown to a minor as long as the minor is, correctly identified on the platform. But it goes a little bit further than that. So, for example, interface design, you cannot, for example, have explicit or adult content on, say, a login screen. So if you've got a web part for logging in, some people have a kind of two-factor authentication that uses web content. You cannot have adult content on it, but you can't also use addictive or exploitative psychological ways of getting people to continue playing or log into your platform. Now, there is a very good book that I've got coming, which I'll talk about in a future webinar, called Addictive. And it is about how to make apps that are very psychologically exploitative. How many people do you come across that have got notifications, and the notifications are actually a way of gaming the content? It makes you want to go, oh my gosh, I've got like 25 notifications from Facebook or something like that. And most, people, if they see 25 notifications and then the next time they look at it, it's a 36, then there's a very strong motivation, psychological impetus to actually go and click on that app and open it to see what those 36 notifications were, even if 35 of them you don't care about. And TikTok is mentioned in the chat there, and I'm not going to repeat what they say, but let's just say they're not big fans of TikTok. But yeah, it is one of those sites that do actually, I think, probably go close to this. You cannot use what are known as dark patterns. So your user interfaces cannot use kind of psychological methods of making people sign up who are minors. Dark patterns would include, for example, behavior that encourages the minor to sign up and keep quiet about it and not let their adults know. Another thing might be a dark pattern where, hey, this is so cool, but you know what? It's too cool for an adult to know about. Those are kind of dark patterns. I know it sounds ridiculous, but people do this. There are interface design tricks that people will use, like image backgrounds that have got a very high alpha blending value, and and it's subtle. It's almost invisible, but and literally dark, or literally faded out. But it's again, it is trying to encourage someone to sign up. It's against the law, and Article 28 specifically mentions it and calls it out. So it's not just about worrying about the APIs that we're going to talk about in a moment, but also you need to think about every part of what you're doing, particularly login screens, because that's one place where almost all your users are going to go to without you knowing what age they are. So if your login screen or you have a sign up screen, um, you must make sure that you think very, very carefully about the user interface design so that you're not trying to encourage someone of the wrong age group to sign up. And that includes, like I say, call to actions like, hey, this, sign up to the coolest thing or whatever. There's language that you have to avoid. Uh, and again, recommendation algorithms, you cannot allow a minor to be offered incentives to recommend the system to other minors um, based on profiling. Yes, not based on profiling. So, in other words, you can't encourage them to get their friends to sign up, um, and reward them for that. It's a regulation in the article. You need to read it in depth, but it goes into depth about it. Privacy first default settings required. In other words, you have to assume that this person is a minor, and you do not gather information about them until you know they're not a minor. So you can gather certain information that's necessary to run the system, and that has to be something that is suitable for a minor. So you can't ask them about, the gender, for example. You can't ask them, private information about their address. You can't even ask them what city they're in many cases. Privacy first. You've got to think about this a lot more seriously than you would imagine. And again, you need to also provide parental tools or at least subscribe to the things like the iOS parental tools and stuff like that. Age verification measures must be implemented. In other words, you should be using the APIs provided by Apple and Google and making use of those, and then actually acting based on those values. Also, make sure you don't lie in your submissions to the App Store. So if you say that it doesn't contain certain types of content because you think, well, we'll sneak under the radar, if you've done that and you do then later expose some minor or something like that to age inappropriate content, you've just broken the law. So just be very careful. Again, same with the EU. I'm not going to go into this, but it's all about verification, going through and making sure. Now, the EU is still trying to work out what to do with age verification. Their default kind of position is to make iOS and Android ask, but they're not quite sure what to do about web pages or desktop apps. The basic problem behind that is that Linux is very fragmented. I mean, there are probably as many distros as there are, stars in the sky for Linux and Windows. There are lots of people using old versions of Windows, older versions of Windows. There are a lot of people using Windows 7, for example, when they probably shouldn't. But the reality is people do in various countries, and Windows 10 and Windows 11. So they've got a bit of a problem when it comes to desktop apps because the APIs do not exist. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do once they mandate that Microsoft provide some kind of API mechanism in Windows. Are they going to say, well, you've got to implement it in Windows 10 and 11 because they're still supported? Yeah, probably. But are they able to ignore the fact that there's a Windows 7 user who's never going to have that API because they're not going to place it? Does that make Microsoft liable if they know? Because they know you're using Windows 7, they just turn a blind eye and say, "Sorry, we don't support that anymore. We don't give you the updates, so you're gonna get a virus at some point." Does that exclude them from being responsible for the law? I'm not so sure it will. So we'll see what happens when that crops up, but hey. It is what it is. And UK, who just today have banned anyone under 16 having a social media network. You cannot use Facebook, you can't use Instagram, and lying about your age is probably not going to help you. From today, the UK have banned it. Age appropriate design code. So, in other words, going back again to how you think about how you design your app. So, if you are allowing certain age groups to use your app, you have to make sure that your user interface is appropriate for that age group, and that includes jokes that you might put in there, images, they can't be exposed to certain types of images, how you do the incentivizing of people to sign up and all the rest of it. It's a pain in the neck. And the UK covers, everybody that you would think that the EU rules cover, but the UK, or the United Kingdom, or Britain, if you're American, Great Britain, it is no longer part of the EU, so they have their own regulations, and they're not the same as the EU. They're similar, but they're not the same. The fines are up to 18 million UK pounds, or 10% of the global annual qualifying turnover, whichever is greater. So let's say you are Facebook and you are found to be in breach. Facebook's turnover is, I don't know how many million per year, possibly hundreds of millions. 10% of their global annual qualifying turnover. So that's all the money that Facebook earns worldwide. They want 10% of it as a fine. Okay. And UK ban social media type category only. I believe so. Yes, Jay. I haven't seen it happened this morning, so I haven't got the update, but I believe it is only for social media categories. So I'm guessing they're going to go for the big ones like Instagram and I'm not sure what they do about TikTok. That's going to be a blow to lots of teenagers if they decide that's social media, which I think they probably do. It also is going to be a problem if they ban, for example, Discord and say that it's a social media rather than a comms app, because I know a lot of teenagers use Discord very heavily for games and things like that as well. So, yeah, I mean, social media in games, that's another category, isn't it? But anyway, just to go back to the UK law, 10% of the qualifying turnover worldwide, global. So in Facebook's case, Amazon's case, Google's case, that's a big chunk of change. 10% is going to be painful. So yeah, interesting. Brazil digital ECA, hooray! Yeah, everybody's got a law. They also have some specific laws about some other bits, and those are things like loot boxes and randomized in-app purchases in games. So you can no longer offer those if your player is under a certain age group. Now, I don't have the Brazilian laws, but I believe, based on what I see there, is it's under 18s are considered minors. So you cannot offer loot boxes. If you've got a game, you're writing a game, you cannot offer a loot box and any form of, I don't know, armor or something like. If it's a fighting game, quite often you can, trick out your armor that you've got or your clothing or something like that to look cool. So you've got like fire stripes down your arms or something like that. If it's a kind of first player shoot 'em up kind of thing. Which actually, by the way, might be a problem if it's first player shoot 'em up. You can say that's violence, but you cannot offer those, and that's going to be a blow because I imagine for a lot of games apps, that is actually where a lot of income is made through loot boxes. We've all seen horror stories in the press about loot boxes where kids have got hold of the parents' credit card, max the credit card out buying loot boxes. Never actually happened to me, but it was close with my daughter. She's 25 now, but she's a gamer. And in fact, she's married now, and her husband's a gamer. They're both gamers still, but I remember her buying some stuff once, and I'm like, what? It was a lot of money as well. It does happen. She never bought loot boxes. It's some armor or something. For the Brazilian laws, self-declaration is not enough. You can't do that. In fact, it's actually prohibited. I suspect that's to stop you being able to capture information that you could later use if you were a shady kind of character. Stronger verification is required. So I'm not quite sure how that's implemented. It's not, I don't have the details of that, but look it up. That's the one, LEI 15.211. Go off and look at that and be very, very sad about it. Aussies in Singapore, you thought you were safe? Incorrect. You thought this was a kind of Northern Hemisphere problem, except for Brazil. No, it is also an Online Safety Act 2021 and amended in 2024, and also the Age Assurance Technology Trial, which was conducted 2024 to 2025 to evaluate verification methods. The Australian catching up, but now app stores must block downloads of 18 plus apps. Well, that's kind of been around for a while. That's an app store problem, and so Google stores and all the rest of it. This is one of the reasons why being outside an app store is heavily discouraged. I know they take 30%, or it's less actually. I think on Apple, if you earn under a certain amount, but they do take 30% of your money every time your app is sold, but you're protected from an awful lot of garbage that you don't want to worry about applying laws to yourself and things like that. The good news is this what this does. This particular rules. They're put on the shoulders of the app stores, and that's the way we like it. Let the big boys with the $1 trillion turnover deal with that for us, and that's what Apple and Google need to do. Australia and Singapore, yep. And while we're at it, there's a whole bunch of them as well. But like I say, the slides will be available later, and plus a bunch of links as well. So what do you do about it? Well, this is, we're going to talk about Apple's one first. And this is actually a problem for Delphi users. I do have a unit which I think fixes this problem, but I haven't tried it yet. I literally finished it this morning. And did I use AI? Yes, I did. I used AI to test it. I used Kai. And if you're not sure what Kai is, where have you been? But the Kai offer is in the top right-hand corner now. And by the way, for those of you that have been using Kai and trying to get it to work with Claude and had a problem, we've got a new blog post out that I did with a video as well that tells you how to configure Kai and Claude to work together. Claude to work together. There was a little bit of an issue. We had a couple of steps missing from the instructions. I think there was some kind of like horrific upheaval in the Claude landscape, and the things changed. Now suddenly I had to sign in through some other way of doing it. But anyway, go to that blog post and it'll explain how to use Kai and Claude together. Failing that as well, if you're looking to upgrade or I think renew, go there and there's a Kai offer that will help make it easier and less painful for you. So let's talk about the declared age range API. This is an Apple API, and it was introduced last year at WWDC 2025. It's already in iOS 26, iPad OS 26, and macOS Tahoe SDK. Now, many people didn't want to upgrade to Tahoe, so you'll find quite a few Macs that aren't running Tahoe. I don't know why. I think it was to do with the liquid glass. I turned it off, liquid glass. It annoys the heck out of me. But you will find that some people are not using Tahoe, so you don't have this API available to you on macOS. You see what I said about desktop being a problem? But iOS and iPad, it tends to be that most people are using the latest versions, and 26 onwards it's been available in it. You do need to be running Tahoe on the Mac, in other words, for it to work. Apple Vision Pro, well, that's not really relevant to our user base, but it is possible to run on Vision Pro and target it. It's basically iOS. Requires Xcode 26. So in other words, you need to have upgraded your Xcode. if because you were using an older version of Rad Studio, you're using an older version of Xcode, which is possible, you can use an older version, you're going to have a problem. Okay, I'm sorry about that. There's not much I can do. Unfortunately, the world moves on. That's how it goes. Um, but it's only available in Xcode 26, and the reason is Xcode 26 pulls down the right version of the SDK. Okay, I think the latest version is 26.4. I could be wrong. I haven't checked recently. But in fact, actually, I can do that. My Mac is next to me. Let's see what it is. Oh no. Oh, I don't have it set up. Go into there and have a look. Hold on, let me just see if I can tell you what version I've got, because I do have my Mac next to me with Rad Studio set up. Yeah, I can't do it quickly. I won't bother. Anyway, so yeah, what happens is very clever, because what they didn't want was you to basically create the ultimate pedophile tool. And I'm sorry to use that term, but the world is what it is, and there are some nasty people out there. They didn't want you to be able to pin down what the age of a person was, so that you could target a very specific age group and say, I want people who are just going to high school for the first time. I want people that are still, in kindergarten or junior school, depending on what country you live in. I want people who are, 17 and, not 21 yet or something like that. So the apps, the iOS SDK doesn't actually give you back the age of the user. It gives you a range. And the range is split kind of down into 3 lots. So there's a bracket, which is, I think, 9 and under, which is kind of like, this person is too young. I think there's a 9 to 13, I could be wrong, and then 13 to 15, as it says there, and then 18 or over. So basically, you can tell what age range someone's in. There's a very long description at this year's WWDC, and in fact, WWDC 2025 session 299. You can Google that. There's a YouTube video about it. Tells you how this works. And it explains why they do it that way and what they're trying to avoid and what they're trying to enable. It also tells you the mechanism of how it works. So it doesn't update on the person's birthday, because that would be dumb, right? Because you would just keep checking that person's bracket. And once they changed from one bracket to another, all of a sudden you know how old they are exactly, and you know their birth date if they're using the app every day, and it changes on Wednesday at the 5th of January, then you know their birthday is the 5th of January, which actually exposes private information about them. And given that you know that they've gone from 9-year-old bracket to 13-year-old bracket or something like that, you would know that that person is 13 on the 5th of January, because of the way that it works. No, it doesn't do that. What it does is works on the anniversary of the bracket being established. And what that allows is that person could be in a lower bracket for up to a year after they exited that bracket. And it also does the opposite. So they could be in the new bracket for up to a year before they exit as well. It's kind of weird. The WWDC video explains it much better than I'm explaining it, but that's how it works. It's kind of smart in a way, I suppose. And the behavior can change per region, because as we've shown, all sorts of countries got all sorts of regional variations. And when you go into App Store Connect, which is how you upload your iOS apps, there's some information in there that asks you, and they configure that as well. So you can give 3 minimum age thresholds and say, I don't want to ever have anybody under a certain age group using my app, which is perfectly reasonable. And so you might say, I only want adults to be using my app. Let's say it's a dating app, for example. I would say you are on very shady ground indeed if you produce a dating app and you produce it for minors. I'd say it's probably breaking many laws, and also it's an invitation to, having a lot of grief in your life and many court cases. So generally, a dating app would have to be making sure that the person's an adult. And so when you call the age declared age range API, you're making sure that that person is a certain age and they're an adult. Easy to do. How does it work? Well, compliant app, you call this declared age range API, and then it comes back with some information. I'm not going to go into too much details here because we'll talk about this in a moment. But basically, it'll come back and say they're either this age, under 13, or they're 13 to 15, 16 to 17, or they're an adult. And it's as simple as that. So you can tell, a 2-year age range, shall we say, once they're over 13. But if they're under 13 or they're over 18, you've got absolutely no idea what age they are. You just know that they're a minor and a minor, or they're an adult. The family sharing, which is quite important, and a lot of people think they're being, good when they actually mark their child as an adult, so that their child who's been badgering them to use some kind of apps that they want to use, will turn off family sharing and say, "Oh, actually, I allow family sharing." So family sharing, if you don't know, allows everybody who's on the same family group to share apps. So if I install Claude or something random like that, or Slack on my iPhone, with family sharing, everybody else gets it installed as well. And it's the same for a paid app. So if I download a game, and that game's a paid game, I pay $4.99 or whatever it is for it. With family sharing, up to 5 people or 5 members of my family, and they don't have to be actual family, but the way it works, they have to be someone at least that you consider family, like a son-in-law or something like that, or a cousin. Under family sharing, they all get the app, but in the family sharing, one of the people or more is dedicated as a parent or an administrator of the family sharing group, and so their responsibility is to decide which person is a child or a minor and which person is an adult. Lots of people decide that actually this particular child is actually an adult, because that way they get less nagging from the child. I know what it's like. I had a child. She's grown up now, but don't do it, because this is how you start getting into this problem where the app can only rely on what it's told. If you say someone's an adult, there are in some regions it will actually ask you to prove that, and that person, if they've got an Apple account, may have to provide things like state ID or passport or something like that, a verifiable information. Declared age range brackets, I've already mentioned this, but it's kind of like the restrictions ramp down from left to right. So the biggest restrictions are on the left and the lowest restrictions are on the right. Once you get to 18, it's pretty much you can have anything you like, any game, doesn't matter if they rip people's heads off or chop them up with whatever, chainsaws. I've seen games that do that. Something particularly unpleasant, doesn't matter. Once they're over 18, as long as you're not breaking the law about showing that content in the particular region. There are some regions where, for example, showing someone consuming alcohol is considered adult behavior, even though the person is not doing it. You seeing them consuming alcohol could be illegal. I know it's weird, but that's the world we live in. But once they're over 18, then there tend to be no restrictions, but there are laws, and you can't just randomly show things that break the law. Adult content has got some elements where there's a limit, and I don't need to go into details on this channel what they are, but you can work it out for sure. Under 13, yeah, well, they're pretty much, they can watch videos that are appropriate for their age group, and they can play games that are appropriate for their age group. They can do educational content, stuff like that, but they're not going to be using social media, for example, because it's considered, you know, unpleasant or potentially risky, and it goes on like that. Declared age range, again, I'm not going to go into too much details, but privacy by design. So it's not allowing you to know the person's age, it's just knowing which of those four categories they fall into. Are they a child? Are they not a child? It's really almost as simple as that. The minimum information necessary. If the user declines, the app receives an unknown state. Okay, so they are asked by iOS to provide information. If the user declines to confirm their age, then what comes back is a thing that says, no, we don't know what they are. And you have to assume that they are a child. So in other words, you got to handle it, but you've got to make sure that you don't go ahead and show content that's inappropriate for someone of that age. Again, watch the WWDC video 299 from 2025 because it goes into a lot of detail and shows this in action and how it works. Parental controls and family sharing. Again, there's some stuff to do with when you can share, when they cannot share, and ask me first. So if the app requests the child's age range, then the parent gets a notification saying whether or not the app can be told that information. I like this idea. So if the kid goes away and secretly installs some app that they're not supposed to have, or it's an okay app that maybe the school's told them to use, and it contains information that is considered appropriate for a certain age range. Let's say it's the 13 to 15 age range, and it could be educational information about, shall we say, biological functions. That you wouldn't show a minor, but you might show as an educational thing a certain age group before they can get pregnant and things like that. You would want the parent to receive a notification about that, but you wouldn't necessarily want the child to have to come and keep showing you everything and say, "Is it okay if I do this?" So what happens is when it says "ask first," you're basically saying, "Look, I think it's okay for this kid to have some of this stuff, but I want to make sure that I'm in control." I love this idea. So the parent can say, "Oh yeah, I know that's what they're doing. I was told they were going to be watching a video about childbirth, for example, as an educational thing, in an app that's come down from a school or someone like that, and I'm okay with that." Likewise, you might be going, "Oh God, no, there's no way I want them to see childbirth because that will terrify them. Plus, I haven't had the talk about where babies come from." And therefore you might say, "No, it is what it is." I know it sounds weird, but that's how it works. So ask me first. I think it's a good idea. Declared age range, it's already out in various countries. Weirdly enough, Australia, Brazil, Singapore was available from iOS 26 launch, which was last year. It's being rolled out in various states. Utah and Louisiana are May 2026 and July 2026 as well. So next month, at the time we're recording this. The EU and the UK have not done this yet, so this is probably a good thing, but you should still be getting ready for this. And it's not actually something you can do with the current version of Rad Studio, and I'll talk about this. You can do it, but you'll need to download a API to do this. Ships globally with iOS 26, so the API is in there, and as soon as the region activates those specific signals, then you can configure it in the App Store Connect. So once you submit your apps, then you can say, "I want to know about this," and your app can then call that API and receive the necessary information. macOS, again, macOS is okay, but as long as they're using Tahoe. If they're using an older version or they've got an older Mac that can't run Tahoe, then it's a problem. What changes for iPhone users and iPad? Well, it's age gating on apps and things like that. Their apps that they think are perfectly reasonable might stop working. I imagine there are a lot of very annoyed British children at the moment who've just today been told they can't use social media if they're under 16, 16 or under. So that's going to be an interesting conversation at home. But yeah, it's also their app behavior might change silently. In other words, a 14-year-old who thought something was working, and when the app law comes in and you suddenly change your behavior in your app and don't tell them about it, something stops working. They don't know why. So you need to make sure that you deal with that. Google Play. Well, Google Play is easier to deal with. There is an API that's available, and I'm going to tell you where to get that. And the Google Play Age Signals API is where we're at. What does it do? It's client-side API with Google Play services for Android apps. It was beta service status early 2026. They are rolling out progressively across regions. And it integrates with the Google account age verification, which, if you haven't done that, you will find at some point you'll be asked to prove that you're an adult. I can't do that because I'm not an adult. I may be physically old, but I'm not actually a child. But I'm not a grown up either. But anyway, configured via the Play console and the age signals section. Again, it's when you submit your app. Again, it returns three pieces of information: the verification status, supervision status, and age range bracket. The bracket works exactly the same as iOS. And sounds almost as if they spoke to each other and actually cooperated. It's the under 13, 13 to 15, 16, 17, and 18. So it's easy to work it out. These are the brackets that you're going to be dealing with universally. It's designed to support US laws, Brazilian laws, and the EU laws as well. How does it work? Well, you call the API and it comes back with a couple of different status. One of them is verified. In other words, yeah, we know that person is who they say they are. We've checked some ID or credit card or some other thing. Paying with a credit card actually helps establish the age. However, the credit card has to be in the name of the person holding the account. So if the child is using their dad or their mum's debit card or credit card, the name on the card and the zip code or postcode has to match the person whose account the name is in, if you see what I mean. So if it's a child's account and they're using their parents' card to pay, it's not going to be verified by the credit card. So they have to provide an ID. And of course, a child shouldn't be able to do that. And so it's a fairly well thought out problem. The other thing is supervised. That's not as common. They're under family link parental supervision, strongest signal for minors. If it's supervised, then it means you should be very, very careful about what you show them. They've declared their age themselves. You should be, again, very careful about this. If someone has declared their age range but claimed to be an adult, particularly if you are the kind of app where you are going to, by the nature of the app, attract minors to it. Facebook being a classic example, but there are lots of other apps where you can think, you know what, this kind of app that a kid would love. It's a game or some kind of trendy thing that they're all going for. Even something as simple as a remote control app for controlling some kind of device like a drone, a non-commercial drone. Yeah, even that is potentially possible to be a problem because a child in most states shouldn't be controlling a drone anyway. So if they come back and declare they're an adult, you need to probably have a think about whether you should verify it in a different way. Undetermined is the same as before. It just means they chose not to tell you. That's their right. They can do that. But you should also then assume that that person is not an adult or act accordingly. Same details as iOS, so I'm not going to go into that. Parental supervision on adult on an Android device, the supervised status, you can give your child a device and then activate the parental link for their account. And that means that when they go to do something, the parent can decide whether or not they're allowed to do it. Again, I really like this idea. I think it's a brilliant idea. Just one sec. Sorry, I needed to have a drink there. Um, I like the fact that the parents can say, "Yes, I'm okay with this content," even though it is potentially adult. So the example I gave was watching a video of childbirth or learning about some kind of laws or something like that that you might consider inappropriate for a child to learn about. You wouldn't necessarily want to learn about laws to do with the death sentence, for example, if a child is 9 years old. Some people would, but some people might say, no, I think my kids should not be learning at that age. They need to be older so they can understand, the pros and cons and, not be upset by it. So that's it. What may you do? Well, again, I'm going to make these slides available rather than talk through it. But there's things you can do and things you can't do. And it's up to you to decide what those are. Don't fall foul of the law. And when do these come into force? When are they rolled out? Well, pretty much by the time of this video, the first 3 steps, we're recording this on the 16th of June. So Louisiana is up next, but Utah, Brazil, and the data use policy is already in force. So if you're writing apps for Brazilian users, you should be doing something about this in the Google Play Store already. And I've just got an API that you can download for this for Google Play Store already. Louisiana is up next, and then Texas. Where this information is slightly out of date. This has actually been enacted now, and it is live in Texas. So the federal decision was last week. The slide was made before then, but now it is actually a regulation in Texas. The hold has been removed. And then additional regions, same as we talked about for iOS. What changes for Android users? Well, again, same thing. You've got to come back with verified statuses or unverified and act accordingly. I'll make the slides available so you can read all that. Real world impact. Well, mobile app users are going to get asked a lot more questions. Loot boxes and stuff like that. No, not in Brazil. If you're a games developer and you are trying to sell to Brazil, UK, or Belgium, and some others as well, you're going to have to watch out because you're going to fall foul of this. Social media apps, if you're now writing a social media app and you need to decide whether your app is possibly under any circumstances to be considered a social media app, first of all, you're banned in the United Kingdom as of today. And that means England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And yeah, you are banned as of today. That law came into force this morning, my time. And loot boxes in Brazil, that's been around for a while. So yeah, it's a problem. Streaming services, age-gated content. Again, music. If you play music, for example, you cannot play music that's inappropriate for an immature audience. Communication, you can't allow direct messaging with strangers unless they're over 13. So, there's a lot to consider. And macOS apps, Delphi, FireMonkey apps, you can call the declared age range framework. However, I'm going to explain how to do that, because it's not actually possible without a little bit of code. Because the API for iOS is only available via Swift. And you need to use a Swift Bridge app to do that, to call this API. So you need to create a .a file and then build it in. I've done that. I used AI to help me do that. It was actually Kai that I used to do that, but and with Claude, by the way. But with the desktop apps, yeah, you should be calling this. For web apps, then there's no direct equivalent to the AI. So the W3C is currently discussing how to deal with this. So everyone's catching up. In my opinion, the safest thing is to find some kind of system that does verification services and use that. So log in via Google is probably pretty good. Login via Amazon and login via Apple will probably provide the necessary level of validation. You can do it that way. I would say one of the bit of the advice on this screen here is not a good one, which is payment card checks. No, I don't recommend that for a web app. If you're only using it for ID validation, that's a very bad idea. Because you actually open yourself up to all sorts of other potential, you know, potential, risk if you start taking payment apps just for ID verification. But having said that, the Copper 2 and EU apps apply equally to web services. Web compliance you can't ignore it. Delphi TMS Web Core and intraweb apps must implement their own age gate mechanism for now. There isn't one available, as far as I'm aware, like a universal one. So yeah, watch out. You're probably going to have to, like I say, the way I would do it if I was asked to do it, I would use some kind of login via Google and do it that way because I think there are some options that you can apply to that. Oh, what happened to my slide here? My font is broken at this resolution. That's annoying. Sorry about that. Declared age range is Swift native, so yeah. Sorry about the font. I'll fix this and you can download this. If you're going to test it, and right now you can't, but if you're going to test this, use a physical device is the advice. The reason is that the device simulator is pretty useless at validating this. Best practice is abstract age change logic, age check logic behind a platform interface or service class. I've got a class for this that I'm going to give to you, which I will make available. Android, there is actually an option available today for doing this. So if you've got Android apps, which actually quite a lot of people have, then don't worry, it's already dealt with, and you can call this and go ahead and do it. Windows Desktop, nope, you've still got the same problem. So I'm telling you about the laws, but there is no actual OS level API. That's down to Microsoft. I expect that they're going to produce one very shortly and fix that problem. Okay, and I will fix that font as well for the download. So yeah, when's it in force? Well, pretty much now. You know, it's now and next month. Comply now is the answer. And the key thing to remember about this, so we're nearly at the end, and then I'm going to show you some code and some downloads. But nearly all the states, like 19 states, so just under half the US states have already enacted this. I expect the others to follow. Once you've got nearly 20 states doing this, the others tend to look at this and go, do you know what, maybe we should do this. But even so, because you can't really determine where your users are unless you're tracking their GPS location, just because someone is in a state that doesn't enact the law, for example, what if they travel? What if they're a kid that travels for school? What if they go for summer break, spring break, or something like that to a different state? Once they're in that different state, say Nebraska or Texas, they're subject to these laws and regulations. So you can't assume that because there's only, quote, 19 states that you are able to ignore it. No, that's not how it works. Platforms APIs are the answer. Yeah, I absolutely recommend it, when we can, and we'll talk about Apple in a second, but when we can, use the API from Google, which the operating system's still catching up. Windows, we're pretty much stuck. Microsoft need to come up with a solution, but that means you've got to take your own steps to actually fix this. Okay. The brackets for the ages are aligned globally, so it doesn't matter whether it's Brazil or UK or US, they're pretty much the same. It's almost like they talk to each other. What you can't do is take birth dates, and you cannot scan government IDs. That is not something you can do. The API does all that for you. The operating system does all that for you. They will give you an age range, and that way you're not capturing personal private information, which has got its own laws and fines and things like that as well. When do you need to do it? You need to do it now. It's already effect in multiple jurisdictions. Now, I would say that if the jurisdictions prosecute a desktop app, for example, on Microsoft Windows, I think that's very interesting that they could do that, because given that Microsoft aren't providing a mechanism at the moment for complying with these laws, what exactly are you supposed to do? You can pretty much put your own steps into your app, and as long as you take steps to avoid minors and you've shown due diligence, then what they're going to do. Well, again, this is not legal advice. Don't rely on me. I'm a software developer, not a lawyer. Go and ask a lawyer what the correct answer is. But I don't know how they're going to sue people if there's no way of actually checking that information. But that doesn't mean to say they won't. The laws are there, and we're supposed to be applying them now. Go to the documentation. These slides are available shortly. Developerapple.com, documentation, declared age range. Very useful, very informative. Developerandroid.com, and then the age signals API. So declared age range and age signals are the names you need to look for. If you're submitting apps, rely on the App Store to do it for you. Don't go through some shady, third-party app store and hope that you're going to get away with it. 30% loss on your app price for Apple hosting it, dealing with all the payments, dealing with the verification of the age range, avoiding the legal pitfalls, I think is probably worth it. You might not, but I think I would rather sleep well at night and not worry about my, getting nasty letters from the FTC or whoever it is enforcing the law. Same with Google Play. Yes, it's painful when they take a cut of your profits, but in exchange, you get them, sent to the right people who are going to use your app and go from there. So that's it. So that's my slides. Let's go back to what we're talking about here. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. First of all, where's my browser? Hold on. Sorry. So first of all, during the webinar, we've been talking about Kai on the screen there. And you've got a little QR code, which is not showing up. So I'm going to hide that QR code because it's too white. But if I just hit F11, we mentioned Kai. I have actually used Kai to produce something which I'm going to distribute later. But there's an article about Kai and Claude. If you're using Kai, you've tried Claude and Kai together and had problems with it, you might find that it keeps saying that Claude needs to log in. Okay. This is something that we're trying to work on at the moment. But what you need to do is follow the updated steps in the wiki. Okay. So this is the .wiki, and there is the Claude integration, and we've added a few extra steps with some screenshots to show you what to expect. So look for the environment variables, go in there, update the path, and click on new, and then put in user profile. I know there's quite a lot of steps, not our fault. Claude is very popular, and they're taking steps to make it difficult to interact with them. So this is how you have to do it with Claude. For the other service providers, it's not quite so complex, but that's just how Claude does it. And for those that want to know, the insiders that are watching at the moment, I still see lots of people on the live view. These screenshots are from my machine, so there you go. There's a little window into my world. I took the screenshots of the .wiki, but that is an update there. So go to the blog, and it will tell you what to do, and then there's a video where I explain it as well. So if you haven't seen it yet, that's worth having a look at. Now, the next thing is talking about the I've already mentioned the offer. the age signals. So this is the Google website, which is developer.android.com forward. In fact, let me just highlight that so you can see it. Uh, age signals. Now, again, I'll have a link to this in the blog post that I'm going to do that follows up on this, and also you'll be able to download the code. But play age signals overview. Okay, and it explains how it works and what it's all about. And this is on the Google developers page. Okay, and just for good measure, there's one for Apple as well, which is called the Declared Age Range Framework. And again, this is on Developer Apple. If you look for Declared Age Range or Google that, you can easily find it. Okay, and it explains how it works and what methods you get back and properties and all the rest of it. And you might think, well, great, Ian, that's really, really great. But how do I go ahead and make that happen? Well, go to everyone's favorite Delphi Worlds. Okay, I'm going to make this go over to this side. Either scan that QR code, which is in the top left-hand corner. Here, look, I can point to it with my mouse. Either scan that QR code or just go to delphiworlds.com and join the Slack team. Okay, the reason is that there are a bunch of people in there that are very knowledgeable about writing mobile apps with Delphi. So I absolutely thoroughly recommend it. But if not, go to Delphi Worlds. Now, the reason is that Delphi Worlds, the same guy that does that is actually the guy that writes the Castry library. Okay. If you've never used Castry before, where have you been? It is an incredible system. Okay. And I'm going to make this one go over here because I know this is easier to scan. Castry has already implemented the API for the age signals. Okay, Castry is very easy to use. All you need to do is download it and either use GitHub or go to releases and download it that way. But Castry has got everything you could ever want to make Delphi amazing with mobile. Okay, I can't say enough good things about it. And also, like I say already, go to the Delphi World site. And by the way, if you do find Castry useful, it doesn't have to be a lot, but just click on the sponsor button and sponsor him a little bit. Dave, who works on this, Dave Nottage, whose name you can see at the top there, puts a massive amount of effort into this. And he's like any other developer. He's always looking for the next job. He's a contracting developer, and if you are looking for someone to help you out, and you've got some money to spend on a developer, you couldn't go far wrong, hiring Dave to do it. Dave is an excellent MVP and an excellent tech partner. He's really good at what he does, and also runs the Delphi Worlds Forum, which is the premium place to go to for information about mobile development with Delphi. But more importantly, he's got this really great API. Now, let me just close that one for a second, and I'm going to call it up here, and that is the Age Signals API. Okay, and you can go to Castry API, and then it's in there. But just download Castry. I'm going to show you in the browser in a moment, in the IDE in a moment. But basically, it contains all the information you could want for the Age Signals API implementation under Android. Sorry, I forgot the operating system for a moment there. And it's a pretty complete implementation. And more importantly, let me see if I can pull it up. Let me just run it. Age Signals demo. Here we go. Just opening it on my machine. If I just go over here and open it up, here's got a demo, okay, which is in the demos folder, and it is called Age Signals Demo. Okay, so download Castry, but also download the Castry how-to, and I'm going to put the link here to it. The age signals demo that I'm showing on the screen at the moment, if you scan that QR code, it will take you to it. But if not, just go to github.com/Delphi Worlds forward slash, what is the actual URL? Castry slash how to. So Castry, C goes Kastri, and then go to the how to, and it's in there, and the age signals demo. And basically, there are two options at the moment because the API may not be enacted on your region or in your API. You can call this function called fetch fake API signals, and it will age signals, and it will come back with a fake version of the API. So you can test that your app's functionality works, even if the API is not available for you to check. Once you've done that, you can simply oh, oh, hit the wrong button there. You can simply instead enable that and call fetch age signals, and it will actually go off and call the Google Play API and come back with correct information. Now, what does it have? Well, it's documented in Castry, but go to the Google Play information and it will tell you what information you will get back. It gives you a status, which tells you whether the person, as we talked about earlier on, is supervised, or whether it's been declined, the approval's been declined, or if they are under 13, or if they are over 13. In the demo, it will tell you what how to set the upper and lower bounds of the age range, and you can also give your installation ID as well. So look this up. It'll explain it in the API documentation, and then it'll come back and it will set the user status, and you can then work out from there whether the person is underage or not for what you want to do. I'm not explaining this very well. It's easier if you just go into it and have a look yourself. Look at the documentation. Dave is extremely efficient at showing how these things work. I'm just going to pull that URL up because I actually want to go into the website itself. Let me just do that for a second. Hold on. So age signals. Where is it? Castry. I think it's how to actually. Yeah, it's Delphi World's how to actually is the one that you want. Repositories. How to. Whoops. Helps if I spell how to. There you go. How to. And then in there's a load of demos. You can download this, and then age signals, go to there, and he explains it all. This is what I mean about Dave. If you're looking to hire a developer, go ahead and do it. I mean, I'm not here to be his advertising agency, but he did mention to me that he was looking for additional contracts on top of what he's doing. So, I think in return for basically doing something quite so amazing as all of this, I think he deserves a little bit of pushing a little bit. He's an MVP. There are others available, but Dave is the one we've got in the crosshairs at the moment. But it explains how this works and talks about it and why he's got a fake version in the API. Now, I did try putting it on my device earlier on, but I don't have my device set up properly, and it told me the API was not available in my region, which is a bit weird because actually I'm in Texas where it is enabled. So testing it's going to be interesting. I would show you it working, but I can't. So that's the mishmash of what's happening. Now, I have got another little thing for you as well, which is something completely different. I'm going to say no to that. I'm going to save those changes. And that is, where is it? Oh, come on. Oh, yes, I remember where I put it. Um, and that is, and nobody else has this. Okay, so this is Ultra Edit because I don't have this open in my IDE, but this is a class that wraps the Apple declared age range wrapper. Now, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong, I'm just going to check because I see someone's messaging me about this, and I think they're messaging me in the Delphi Worlds one. No, they're not. Uh, Right, yeah, okay, I see. They're not actually messaging me about what I'm talking. Okay, so I'm going to put this up in a repo and I'll publish it in the blog post. But there is a README that tells you all about the Apple declared age range. Now, the thing about the Apple declared age range, and by the way, this is the latest version of Ultra Edit, which has got a chatbot built in. It's got AI built in, and I'm a big I full disclosure, okay. I do actually get the Ultra Edit for free because obviously I work for Idea, but I used to have it before that and before I worked for Embarcadero, and it's great. This is Ultra Edit, so I've got my Markdown document open, and then this is the Markdown preview. So I've got a full preview, and I've got a chat window as well. I'm not using the chat window at the moment, but I just want you to see that it's got AI built in. But here is a project that I built using Kai. Now I don't have it enabled in my idea because of what's going on, and plus again I broke what I was doing. And it's actually on um, my Mac, but I have something on my Mac I can't show you. But here it is, a wrapper for um, the age range API, the declared age range API. Now we can't just wrap this straight away, okay? And the reason is that Apple have not, in their wisdom, have not released a Objective C version of the declared age range API. They've only released it for Swift. And so what we need to do is create a Swift class that basically exposes the API to C. And then what we do is we then create a declared age range PAS that then links to the API, the C version of the API. So this creates a .a file, and then we link it in, and then there is your class. So this should be a class that will work with the declared age range API for Apple. As far as I'm aware, nobody else has done this at the moment. This is free. It's going to be put up on the blog post that I do after this webinar. So it'll probably be tomorrow. I've got a lot on, but you're welcome to download it. I make no claims for it working. Try it and have a look. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, update that repo. Open a pull request and let me know, or email me if you're not into pull requests and tell me how you fixed it. But this is how it works. Now, the reason that it's difficult is that Swift uses a callback. It uses a asynchronous way of asking for the age range. I don't know why they do it that way, but the callback can only be implemented in Swift, apparently. So I'm told, and so you need to actually have a Swift interface, which creates some C declarations, which then we can link to in Delphi. So yeah, it's a weird stuff. Now we being Embarcadero, we are actually looking into this and investigating how we can support it internally in the runtime library ourselves as well. We're aware of it. I don't need you to tell me, oh, it doesn't support it in the runtime library. Look, Windows doesn't support it, so I think we can get away with saying we don't support it at the moment. It is something we're aware of, we're looking into, and as soon as we can, we'd like to support it for obvious reasons. But right now, it's not something built into the RTL or FireMonkey or anything like that. But obviously, we would like to do that, and we're looking into it. But here's a class. I used Kai and Claude actually to generate this, and it was Claude that produced this code and did all the thinking. I used up 95% of my Claude uh, allowance to generate this, which was insane. But apparently, there's an awful lot for it to research. But there you go. But anyway, so Ultra Edit, very, very cool. And there's all your stuff ready to do that. So I will make this available for you so that you can go ahead and have a play around with it. So, and the same with the slides as well. I'll make sure that's available. Weird stuff. We live in a world where it's a global economy, really. I mean, we all know that. And, you can't get away with saying, if my application, and this is a good question here, if my application is just for free and I don't allow advertising of any kind, then Google can still choose to distribute an ad through my application. No, because actually you'd have to enable AdMob in your app. So that's not how it works. It's the other way around. Actually, if you distribute your app for free, then and you don't include any advertising, then you won't get any revenue, but Google won't do it. However, that doesn't excuse you from being required to adhere to the rules and regulations. You still need to call those APIs for Google. Sorry. The fact your app is free is neither here nor there. Your app could be completely free and show pornography. True? It could be a pornographic app. Your app could be completely free and it could show, you know, offensive material, like extreme racism would be considered offensive, for example. However, US freedom of speech laws would probably allow that, but not if the person is under 18. Because there are regulations about what you can show to someone who's a minor, whether whether you argue it's freedom of speech or not. You can the thing about US First Amendment is whilst you have the right to freedom of speech, it doesn't have it doesn't protect you from the prosecution that may follow because of what you said. You can say something, but that doesn't make it legal. It makes it legal for you to say something, but not what you say is if you're calling on, I don't know, to overthrow the government or something. If during that process you break some laws, you can still be prosecuted. They just can't necessarily stop you from saying things. So yeah, of being a free app doesn't really excuse you from anything. It's like saying I went to school, and I gave out free cannabis. If cannabis is illegal and you give it to kids as well, you've broken one law, which is distribution of cannabis, and secondly, distributing it to minors is probably illegal in countries and states where even cannabis is legalized. So yeah, you don't get away with it just because it's free. It's not as simple as that, unfortunately. I wish it was. I wish life was easier, but the more complex computing becomes, the more the more onus is on the developer to comply with regulations and complexity and handle that complexity. Unfortunately, when I first started as a developer, there were virtually no rules about anything. I'm not kidding. I started coding in the early 1980s. I've said before that I've been a developer for 42 years, I think. Might be my 43rd year this year. Anyway, it's a long time. And when I first started, nobody cared about regulations to do with computing because it wasn't like not anything anybody thought about. And gradually over time, computers have become more widespread and more used, and now they're everywhere, aren't they? I mean, that behind me there may be a game, but it's a computer. And it's showing Rampage because that is a child-friendly game. But if I was actually showing Mortal Kombat 2 or any of the Mortal Kombats, this game is able to play up to 11 different games. Many of them Mortal Kombat 2 was actually considered adult material at the time it was released in the 1990s, I think. So I have to not show that. And as he says, assume no 18 plus content, how to go through the API procedure story mentioned. Well, if you're being distributed by the store, the API is still available anyway. It's on the SDK. The SDK has it, whether you're distributed through the store. So if someone downloads your app, what happens is when you call the SDK, then it calls the operating system, which is Android. Android does the management of it. It's not the store. It's Android does it. Now, if you're uploaded via the store, then there are other age signals that you can add, and then they don't show your app to people that are minors, for example. So if you say this app is adult content, then they're not going to actually show it in the Play Store for minors. But that doesn't mean to say a minor can't use it. So you have to call that API still. And the API is on the operating system, Android or iOS, not on the Play Store. You're not calling anything on the Play Store. You are asking the SDK, come back to me and tell me what age range this person is in, and the SDK deals with all however that mechanism works. I don't know how it works. I just know that it's the SDK you're calling. So don't worry about don't the Play Store is not really particularly relevant. That Play Store is how the apps get on Android in the first place, or iOS. Is how it gets on the iOS device. But all of that management of the age range is to do with the SDK. Now you can add your own mechanisms in place for a desktop app, for example, and I would suggest that that's one thing we're going to have to do. And maybe that might be another session, is that we actually do some code where we actually do that. I don't know how to do that. But the trouble we have at Embarcadero is that if I create a demo that is an established, oh, look at this makes sure that you're compliant with age range signals on desktop, Windows desktop, and someone goes off and uses it, we actually expose ourselves to liability. So it's something that I would be reluctant to do without a lot of, saying, well, you can use this, but you use it at your own risk. It's like saying I gave a child a knife and say, be careful. It's like, and the child cuts itself. Am I still liable? Yes, because I just gave a child a knife. And it's the same with providing example code. If I tell you this code is definitely going to protect you from, a legal exposure, then I'm opening this up to, and I would never do that. I'm not stupid. So it's only required on iOS or Android. How does it work? Watch the start of the video again. Okay, this is recorded, so you can go back later and watch a replay. I explain what it applies to. The APIs, the SDKs only work on iOS and Android. How does it work on Windows? The answer is Windows doesn't have an API for it at the moment. Microsoft problem. So you might have to implement your own way of verifying an age. I don't know that you need to do that. I think that for most desktop apps, if it was me doing it personally, if I was wanting to make sure that I was not exposing myself to a possible risk, then I think I would have a login screen that says, confirm that you are such and such an age, and I would get them to type in some sentence. I confirm I am. You've seen these types of screens. I confirm that I'm over the. Now, if you then go and show adult content, I think you're probably risking it, and which is why I'm suggesting that maybe using logins like login with Google, if you've seen that, login with Amazon, login with Apple, use one of those mechanisms, because they probably are also helping you filter it out. I don't know. I don't have an answer for Windows. Nobody does. There is no API for that at the moment. I'm guessing Microsoft doesn't, because they've not produced an SDK yet for it. Linux is also in trouble. It's already been established that Linux must comply as well. There is no get out just because you're a Linux app. apparently. So yeah, sorry about that. I mean, I don't have an answer because nobody's got an answer. And if Microsoft don't have an answer, then how have I got an answer? I would say um, make your best effort to make sure that you are trying you're making due diligence. You know, you're trying to do your best to make sure that the person who's using your application is appropriate. Now, if nothing that you do is adult in any way on a desktop app and doesn't ask for any personal information and is purely informational, say it's a weather app, um, your risk of exposure to problems is probably quite low, in my opinion, my personal opinion. Um, if you are gathering information that personally identifies that individual, like their address, like their school, their workplace. See, workplace in itself is potentially revealing someone's age. Then I would say that you need to come up with some way of trying to apply due diligence to avoid being in trouble. On Windows, how you would do that, I don't know. But again, I'm glad I'm not at the moment writing apps in this kind of environment because if you go back at the start of this webinar, you see that it applies to all sorts of scenarios. So, you know, I'm sorry I don't have all the answers, but you know, I would be careful. Anyway, I think that's it for now. I am going to follow this up with a blog post, downloadable source code, and also the slides will be available as well because I know there were a lot of slides, like 42 slides or something like that, a lot of information in it. But as I started to research this, and I do research these, as you can see, quite thoroughly, it became more and more obvious that it's a massive rat's nest of compliance regulations. So, you know, and it's now. It's not next year or the year after and forget about it. No, it's right now, unfortunately, and not everybody's got good answers. Microsoft certainly doesn't, and we don't currently have it in the RTL. We're a little bit behind, and that's the way that all of these cyclical releases work. Unfortunately, we are looking into it and doing something about it, but we don't have an answer right now. Um, so sorry to scaremonger you, but I'm not. You know, I am not saying, "Oh, do this and buy our product." I'm not. That's not at all what I'm trying to do. You know, it's it's practical advice on some regulations there. Anyway, if you're watching this and you want to, I would, if you're thinking about renewing or you're going to buy a new license, you want to try a trial download of Rad Studio, the latest version, uh, download Rad Studio 13.1. If you go to this page, go to the Kai offer, watching this on the replay or whatever, go there and there are deals where you can almost get Kai for nothing, or actually adding Kai can actually take a massive amount off your bill. So I don't know, you know, don't deal with the money deliberately. I always say this: I'm like the King of England or the Queen of England. I don't deal with money. Not really my part of the ship. I deal with the code and all that kind of stuff. But go there and you can get some good offers. There's some big discounts. I'm not sure what they are off the top of my head. It's like um, up to 40% or something random like that. I don't know. It's quite a lot. But anyway, go there and go to the Kai offer and go from there. But in the meantime, I will see you next time. Till then.